Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the technical focus aspect of the CRA tool by the All Hazards Consortium. We're going to get started with our webinar in about 2 to 3 minutes. Hi, Mary.
Hey, Bud Mertz, I see you're on. Can you hear us? You might have to unmute your phone, but you're unmuted in the webinar. Laura, Bud is on our board. He's the Director of Emergency Management in Westmoreland.
Great. Hey, Bud.
Bud, can you hear us?
I remember Bud. Oh, there's Mary.
Hi, I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, it wouldn't let you in until I hit broadcast. So it looks like you came in as an attendee originally. It's okay. Mary, let's make sure your mics are synced up. Can you say a few words, Mary?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, you sound good. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Good. How about yourself?
Hey, we're doing good. I thought you guys would be sitting next to each other.
We weren't sure.
So,
Yeah, we need separation in case we start arguing.
I love it.
That's great.
Yeah, we're just waiting
So
for...
Mary was a little muffled on my end. Mary, can you count to 10 real quick?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, that's good. And Tim, can you count to 10, please?
Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
What Tom doesn't tell you that really is a test.
INL trains them well.
If you've had your coffee yet. It's early for you guys, right?
Well,
No,
we're
we're
in.
at time. So it's 10 a.m. here.
Okay. Oh, okay. And I see we have John Molnar on. Hey, John. You might not be unmuted, but I just want to say hello.
Good.
We have Dominic on. Thanks for dialing in, guys. We'll get started in just a minute. Hey, Tom, any news from Chris by any chance?
I'm sorry?
Any news from Chris McIntosh?
Not yet. 1 second here.
Okey-dokey.
Yeah.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Just waiting for one more panelist. Bud says hello. He can hear us but can't respond. And he looks forward to our report today, or our webinar today.
So this is funny. Bud Mertz, now director of Westmoreland County EMA in Pennsylvania, is one of our original board members going back to 2005, right? So he has watched things change dramatically. So.
And I like this, Tom. We could talk about Bud, but he can't talk back.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Those are dates that go back to Katrina, you know?
That's right.
Right.
And he is also an avid, if I remember correctly, bloodhound he loves dogs, right? And if I remember correctly, he has great ties to hunting dogs, and stuff like that, which I love. So. Okay, but I unmuted you, so maybe your phone is muted. So if you want to unmute, maybe you can hear you. Okay. Chris is looking for dial-in.
Hit unpause for the recording, Tom, but we can go ahead and get started. And Chris should join us in just a sec.
I'm here.
All right. Oh, hey, Chris, how's it going?
Hey, sorry about that.
That's okay. Good morning. We welcome you, and we're just getting started. So let's go ahead and just want to say good morning, everyone. Welcome to the All Hazards Consortium's technical focus of a new transportation routing app called the Commercial Routing App, or CRA tool. We'll be referring to it as we go on over the next 60 minutes. My name is Laura Johnson. I'm the Director of Conferences and Events for the All Hazards Consortium. Oh, sorry, that's heard some audio. Just wanted to give some administrative remarks before we get started. Again, this is being hosted by the All Hazards Consortium. We're 501c3 formed in 2005. And we're going to talk today about the CRA tool, which was built by Idaho National Lab by support from DHS DISA. We are recording this today, so we'll send the link to those on the line and also post it to our website. So anyone who's interested in hearing about this some more or sharing it with their friends and colleagues, we'll make that available to you. We are not talking about anything secretive or sensitive or with clearance, so it is open source information. This tool meets DHS process and policy requirements and was approved for public release on May 5th of this year. We've issued some press releases on it too. And right now, I think most attendees are muted, but we will have some time for Q&A at the end of the session today. So we'll have a chance to hear from you. There's also the chat box, and you can chat anything to us at any time, just to introduce yourself, or if you have any questions or suggestions or feedback, that'd be great. And I wanted to go ahead and introduce to you Tom Moran, who's the Executive Director of the All Hazards Consortium. Tom?
Hi, Laura. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Good. Good morning. I want to welcome everybody. This is the third in a series of webinars designed to educate people on the new CRA, the Commercial Routing Assistance Tool that was very quickly developed, literally in under 10 days, to be a way of aggregating information out of the SICE, the Sensitive Information Sharing Environment, which you'll hear about in just a minute, to provide truck drivers, planners, logistics folks, safe, legal, and compliant passage around the country as they are moving resources, not just during a pandemic, but for pretty much anything. So it combines the technology of the tool with the reliable information of the SICE into a comprehensive package that is very simple to use. So on the phone today, we have Greg McShane from DHS, who's been part of the program oversight for this, along with Mary and Tim Klett and Chris McIntosh, our technologists. So you'll hear reference to the SICE today. The SICE is a, Laura, back up one slide if you would. The SICE is a legal framework that was put together by the private sector in 2015. It provides protection of private sector information so they can share information with each other and invite government in on specific use cases to share information. So if you wonder about the SICE, you can learn about it at www.siseusa.org. And it provides the framework to organize the people and the data that feed the tool you're going to hear about today. And we'll have many applications down the road. So let's go ahead and jump into our webinar. I'm anxious to get into the technical discussion here because it's fascinating. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Tom. As you mentioned, we have Greg McShane on the line with us today, Mary and Tim Klett from Idaho National Lab, and Chris McIntosh from Bent Ear Solutions. We're going to ask a series of 4 or 5 questions to our panelists today, again, as it relates to the technical aspects of the CRA tool. So let's go ahead and get started into that now. The first question deals with the challenges that were occurring in the industry that led to the development of a new transportation data app. And Greg, if I could start with you on this question.
Sure. Thanks, Laura. And good morning, folks. Hey, this is really a good news story. We started working with the All Hazards Consortium through the NIP challenge. And we really liked the approach of solving operational problems and issues. And we really, weekly meetings, what's the issue, what's the challenge that we're trying to tackle. You can't tackle all these problems at once. So you try to pick them off one at a time and build your arsenal or library of these capabilities so that, when you get to that next response or recovery or event that you're dealing with, you can pull back to those and have them in your tool belt. So where we really started off was, the use case specific to hurricane, where mutual assistance was the need for some of the electric utilities. Power restoration recovery was always an issue and challenge for us. And how do you do it and do it in an efficient, effective manner? So getting the host utility to pull in through their mutual assistance agreements, other utilities from, say, Florida Power Light as the host utility, hurricane hits, and then all of a sudden you're pulling resources from North Carolina, Canada, Long Island, and how do you get those folks to Florida in an effective, efficient manner? And so it's always been a challenge to that. The host utility, the minute these other utilities leave their host state, getting from point A to point B has always been a challenge. So with the COVID-19 really presented an opportunity to, one, we had the right people at the table. Two, we had the technology that has been recently developed, and we had the data feeds available to do that. So, you know, understanding all the restrictions involved, going from state to state and getting through those hurdles, whether it's, you know, restrictions on way stations or height, you know, going from state to state has always been a challenging issue. So that was kind of the original ask, and it all ties back to ESF 14, which is all the sector, cross-sector, dependency, interdependencies. And an ask from our leadership was, hey, we need to minimize any impact to the supply chain. And that was kind of the original intent where we were going. And this presented an opportunity. You know, we talked to our operational leadership from the SIAC, the CISA Watch operations, and said, you know, Brick Wilkinson was, hey, let's see if we can put a capability with this, and getting from point A to point B, understanding the restrictions, the data sets that we had, and feed it into a tool and capability we can leverage. So that was kind of the original story to us. And we're happy where we're at right now, but I think where we want to go with this is, you know, create another opportunities to build off of the capability we just implemented. So.
Okay, Greg, and I know you've been involved in our first couple of webinars as we talked about the CRA tool, but if you could just take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with CISA.
Sure. I've been with CISA going on 14 years now. I support the integrated operations division, all our watch operations and all the other components from intel to planning, readiness, and our regional operations. So anything technical facilities I support and involved in. So.
Okay. Hey, Greg, thanks a lot. Chris, why don't you say hello, and also if you want to add anything to the challenges that led to the series.
Hi, and good morning, everybody. Chris McIntosh with Ventir. The other challenge is we have a lot of data that is available, but how do you actually organize that data and use it to support an operational need? And so we were getting a lot of data about what individual states were doing regarding their transportation policies and infrastructure. And while that was great, we could get it out in some maps and things, we really couldn't configure it to answer the actual need, which is what Greg said. How do I get from point A to point B and navigate all the policies and things that are in place along the way? So the need was a way to organize all that data into an actual application that provided the right information to the right people at the right time. And this allowed for that to happen, to turn all that data into something that's really useful. So it was great to see how it came together.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. Okay, so Mary and Tim, we're going to jump to you guys for question number 2. And again, since this is part 3, this is 3 of 3 of the CRE tool, and we're really getting into the meat of things. We wanted to talk about the technical aspects and how this tool was developed from a technical perspective. So Mary, if you can introduce yourself and tell us what you do at Idaho National Lab and talk about the technical aspects of this innovation.
Sure. I'm Mary Klatt from Idaho National Lab. Primarily do software development, also a lot of critical infrastructure and dependency analysis, also looking at supply chains, things like that. So this was really a great problem to be kind of asked to assist with coming up with a solution for. And so we started by kind of looking at what are some use cases, right? Like everyone said, and it's getting from point A to point B and what challenges you come into. And so then the next thing was, what can we quickly put together that can compile all these different data sources and data points that could be leveraged by people behind a desk on a desktop computer or on the road on their phone or something like that, and how can it quickly display visually the key pieces of information that somebody needs to see. Where are my kind of hiccups along the route that I need to pay a little more attention to, or maybe look at an alternate route, and how can I actually even get to the details? And so for us, it was just trying to build a very lightweight application that could be easily adapted as new data sources and data points are brought in. After it was released, got the cloth face coverings data point. It was very simple to put it in. It was just designed very generically so that you almost have your data sources, your application, and then kind of a translator in between. So what are my different data sources? What are their points? How do we want them to be labeled? And what are the weightings?
All right, Mary, thank you. And Tim, why don't you, we haven't had a chance to hear from you yet. Why don't you introduce yourself, and if there's anything you want to add to what Mary just said.
Sure. I'm Tim Klett with Idaho National Lab, and I've got about 15 years experience working with the Department of Homeland Security. For many years, I oversaw the development, operations, and maintenance of information systems that DHS uses to collect, disseminate, and analyze critical infrastructure data, a lot of it related to supply chain movement of goods. And so really for us, it was a perfect storm, if you will, where, we've worked with Greg in the past, and he mentioned ESF 14. And so when COVID-19 hit the US in early March, we at INL started attending the ESF 14 cross-sector calls that DHS and CISA and FEMA jointly put on. And early on, it was very clear that all sectors were worried about the commodities that they need to run their operations and getting those goods, not only from a PPE perspective, but just the raw materials in general. What are going to be the impediments that the state restrictions are going to cause in the movement of those goods? So understanding that use case and bringing us together with Tom and Chris and their teams really helped paint the picture, if you will, before we even began with the technical work, right? So we really needed to understand the problem and where we needed to go. And so that set the stage. And then from there, the rest was kind of easy in terms of like, okay, Tom and Chris are going to tee up the data. We need a mechanism to provide this to dispatchers and truck drivers in an easy way, something that they can just pick up their phone and use right away without necessarily installing an app or what have you, and work on multiple environments. And so that was what we kept in mind as we developed the application. And then as we got feedback from the rest of the team, we felt like we were along the right path. And as Tom said, within about a matter of 10 days, we had something that was displaying the information in a meaningful way.
All right. Hey, Tim, thanks, and I appreciate the backstory. Greg, I'm curious. So once it moved from the idea stage to the technical stage, I know there are a lot of stages in between, but did CISA have a role once the technical aspects of this were working out, or did you kind of step back and let Idaho National Lab do their thing?
It was interesting how it kind of matured from the start. And originally, a lot of it kind of went back to the data and the data collection. And when we first started this initiative, we stood up our crisis action team, and they were collecting a lot of the state restrictions. It wasn't National Governors Association in the beginning that started. They were also collecting it, but it wasn't made available till a little later. And we would actually send out RFIs to our regional offices to collect a lot of this information, feed it into our crisis action team, and then feed it into the tool. And it was kind of a little bit clunky until we actually, through the S3 hub, had access to the National Governors Association data. So that was another, that ingredient to the recipe that made this work. Again, part of it was, we had the All Hazards Consortium on board. We had Idaho National Labs, which could develop the tool, and we had the data which we could feed it into. And those were the key ingredients to this recipe that made this all work. And with the good work that we had from Idaho National Labs, they rolled out a capability within kind of less than a week, and it was user friendly. It was easy to use. It wasn't clunky. It was very kind of intuitive capability, and we had the data that was filtered. It was sorted. It was very clean, and it could be fed right into the tool. So again, kind of that perfect storm that presented that opportunity to roll out a capability like this. Now, where we want to go with this is goes a lot further than just the state-to-state restrictions. I mean, you can integrate all the other ESF 14 kind of capabilities that are out there that hit a bunch of different sectors that have all that dependency and interdependency information from a CISA perspective. And then, with all the other elements, you're bringing more people and more sectors and federal agencies, state agencies that can actually leverage and build off of this capability. So that in itself is a huge success story.
All right, Greg, thanks so much. Chris, anything to add on especially as it relates to the innovation on the technical side of the tool?
Well, as Greg mentioned, being able to get the data and get it in the hub and make it shareable was a key step in the evolution of this. I'd like to thank our friends at the National Governors Association and the American Trucking Association for doing the work of gathering that data and collating it in a spreadsheet so that we could take that and use it to populate the data services that are being consumed by the application. That was a key step forward in being able to move down this road, and we couldn't do it without the work that those organizations are doing.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to stop my sharing of the screen now. And Mary, Tim, I'm not sure who wants to do the demo, but we'd love to take a look at the tool. There you go, Tim. All right, Tim's grabbed the screen. So Tim,
Yes.
I'm going to pass it over to you. Thanks so much.
Sure. So here we have the commercial routing assistance application. Again, we developed this to accommodate both the standard sort of desktop workstation view and the mobile device view. So I'll quickly just sort of toggle my device here to go to different views. So we had an iPhone there for a second. This is an iPad, and if we looked at an Android phone, you could see that this is the same website, just displayed on various different mobile devices. And we took that into consideration because our use cases and our iterations with Tom and Greg, it was clear that we had multiple user bases, right? I mean, the same information needs to be conveyed, but it's important to adapt to the devices and the technologies that they're going to be leveraging. So that was sort of a fundamental issue that we wanted to make sure that we accommodated. So what we have here on the main screen, it sort of walks the user visually through the different elements of the application. We've got the map routing area, which we'll touch on, which allows for the input of a source and destination area, and then multiple different routes, if applicable, will be plotted. We'll walk through that. Next, we have a state information area, which is a different way to visualize the states and look at the different data sets within each state and how that may impede a route across the country. A detailed information view, which is more of a tabular representation of the data that's represented on the map. And then finally, a summary information that has all of the different data elements rolled up by state. And then you'll see here at the bottom of the main screen here, we have a summary of all the states. And so what we're looking at here are the 6 different data sets that are pertinent to commercial routing as they're, as related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and really a roll-up of the number of states within each of those data elements. So now we'll go over to the map route section. And again, I mentioned, we can enter where we're going to be starting from and where we're going to. So I like to use the example of, a fresh shipment of PPE from the Port of LA, Long Beach, that needs to get moved across the country from Los Angeles to New York. And we can see here that 3 different routes have been planned for us using the Bing API. And as the initial default route is selected, we have those pertinent attributes rolled up. So you can kind of see here that along this route, you're going to run into 6 states that have online only state driver's license agencies. 2 of the states along your route have no extensions on CDL expirations. So things that a dispatcher or a truck driver are going to need as they plan their route quickly at their fingertips, just by entering where they're going from and where they're going to. And then as other routes are selected, this information over here on the left will dynamically update based on the states that will be traversed with this particular route. Moving on to the state information tab, we can see here that the states that were selected on the route, on the map route tab, are now highlighted on this other map of the US. And this map it looks a little bit different than maybe what you're used to seeing. Our visualization expert created this map in a way that seeks to really, I guess, bring out the states that are smaller, so we can actually see Rhode Island here versus that little single dot that we're used to seeing, and minimize some of the other bigger states like Alaska and Montana, just so that we can convey the information without necessarily overwhelming folks with the geographical size of the states. And what you'll see here is, as the route is depicted across the states that were determined by the route that was selected, we see that we have a subway map, as we like to call it, where we have each of the different data elements and the states that will be traversed along the route. And we have an algorithm behind the scenes here that will rank the different restrictions or lack thereof for each of the states. And so we have the scale from red to green, where green would be something that would indicate that the path of least resistance, versus red that may indicate that there could be some impediments along the way in terms of, well, a weight limit wasn't increased, or medical grace periods aren't extended, and so on and so forth. And so you can quickly see, okay, I know what to expect as I cross state lines here between Arkansas and into Tennessee, that if I need to get to an SDLA closure, there's something that I may need to keep in mind along that path. And again, we have a legend here that outlines all of the different data attributes and the specific data elements that you would see within each of those. It's also worth noting that we have an additional set of data along with the truck routing data elements to include the government actions. And as I select government actions, additional data elements are at my disposal to add to the map. So if I'm interested in knowing about school closures and limits on gatherings, or maybe an F1135 waiver status, I can add those to my scenario, and the colors on the map and the subway map will be updated accordingly. The detailed information page, again, is that tabular representation of the same information that we were just looking at on the map. So we've got each of the states that were selected along our route, along with, as columns, all of the different data elements. And it's important to note here that as Chris and his team are updating things on their end, the information that's being rendered will allow the user to quickly access the direct source from where that information came from, right? So if you're interested in learning more about, the online only nature of the California SDLA closures, you can go straight to that source and get additional information. And then additionally, we offer the ability to export this table to CSV or spreadsheet format for dissemination and offline viewing if that's so desired. And then finally, we have that summary information page. Again, this is a roll-up of all of the states that were selected along our route. So you can see here the states that I would be traversing and going from Los Angeles to New York, along with a roll-up of the accounts of the states as binned by the different data elements. So I know that of the states that I'm going to be going through, 4 of them offer a recommendation to use cloth face coverings, while 3 of them I know that I'm going to have to use a face mask when I get out of my truck and go to a gas station or a convenience store. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on is that the data for this application, there isn't anything stored with this application per se. We're going directly out to the source. So if Chris were to update something right now, the next time I click on a page, I'm going to have that latest up-to-date data. So by decoupling the application with the data, it offers us the ability to not only offer that real-time update of information, but also the ability to quickly add additional data sets when they become available. So that to me is the powerful aspect of the tool, in that by decoupling the data, we allow the folks that are really good at curating and making sure the data is good to do that, independent of us having to update anything on our end.
Tim, I'm curious as to your internal team from a technical perspective. How big was the team that developed the tool?
Yeah, so we had 4 folks. Mary is the developer. She's the one that actually made all of the source code do what it needs to do. Rob Etzel is Dr. Rob Etzel is a visualization expert. So he is the one that actually hand developed this map that you're looking at right here. Michael Overton is our geospatial expert. He's the one that helped put the pieces together for the routing elements of the application in terms of where you're going from, where you're going to, and what states will you be traversing. And then me, myself, I'm sort of a security system architect that helped put all the pieces together, if you will.
All right, Tim, I appreciate it. Hey, Tom, I'm going to ask you to unmute for a second, because I'm curious, on behalf of the All Hazards Consortium members, how is this tool advanced or different from other tools you've seen out there over the years?
So the interesting thing about tools, and we've been at this 16 years now, we've seen a lot of really good tools come out, and there's never going to be one tool, right? Every tool, every software system, they're built for specific missions typically, and then they try to expand into other areas, which is all good. What we saw 3 things with this tool. One was the speed. Behind the curtain, we saw in a hurricane, for example, we have 4, 5, 6 states that each issue 2 or 3 documents, a declaration, a waiver, maybe an executive order. With this one, we saw every state issue 30 to 40 documents. It was crazy. So you're talking about 50 states times 30 to 40 documents, and to aggregate all that stuff in less than a second was pretty impressive. One, the data feeding the tool was being updated every day. So the accuracy of the information, this is a really important thing people understand. You can go to websites and look at, COVID-19, and the last update is, May 1st, okay? This stuff is updated last night. So that takes time and resource and people. And Chris McIntosh, who does this for us, they know this isn't just a casual thing. So the second piece was the data. The SICE requires the data to be ranked operational readiness level 1, 2, 3, 4. So to do that, part of that is a 10-step process. One of that is keeping the data refresh rate up. So that was the second piece: speed, the accuracy of the data. And I think the other thing that was unique is this was a great story in public-private coming together quickly, leveraging federal investment, right, on the research side, but leveraging private investment of probably over 100 people involved, plus associations and trade groups that were out there doing it already. It all kind of came together very quickly. All the SICE did was see it, find it, vet it, and and publish it into the COVID hub, the tool pulled from there. So the community is the third part, right? Is the trusted community of people brokering the vetting the information was very unique. And each group were doing it for different purposes. You know, the National Government Association was vetting data for their states, right? This was their focus. American Trucking Association was looking for their stakeholders, right? Healthcare Ready did a great job. They were looking at their focus. So what we were able to do because of our partnerships, we were able to pull all that together very quickly because we've been at this for years. So that was a big thing. Speed of the tool, vetting of the data, and the community, the trusted community that did this, so we didn't have to go off of bad data. And that can mean a big difference. If you make the wrong turn, take you down the wrong trail.
All right, Tom. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and, hey, Tim, thanks for the demo. We're going to move on to our next question. So how do we know the data is reliable? Chris, if I can focus this question to you.
Yeah, it's a really important question. Thank you. So we know we talked through what was going to be our agreed upon authoritative source for this. There's been a lot of data, especially in the COVID ecosystem. Data becomes more available. Studies and experience show that during a crisis, about 400% more data becomes available than available pre-crisis. But how do you know what to use and what not to use? So that's why we went with reputable, well-respected organizations that were pulling this data together in a responsible way, in a consistent way. So National Government Association, obviously, also the American Trucking Association is also very reputable. More importantly, or as important, is those data sets that are behind the scenes of this app actually have links to where they got the data. So we can go back and look at the change in a waiver declaration for the state of Michigan. You can go in the data and link and click on it and see where that came from the state of Michigan's Department of Transportation. So that allowed us to agree upon and establish this as that was operational readiness level 1 data, meaning from authoritative sources that we could trust, that was being updated on a set periodicity, and was being provided in a consistent, reliable manner. So that human analysis is super important in deciding what content you're going to use to power a decision-making tool. And we went through that process very early when we settled on these applications. One other thing is that's important to this is that data is looked at by a human every day. Because sometimes when you're getting data services from other areas, they can change what's in that data. They can add things to it. They can remove things to it. They can change the construct or the data tables that are in that. And many people, probably some on this call, experienced that when Johns Hopkins changed their data table for that and probably broke 50,000 dashboards one day. So that kind of reason we look at that every day to make sure that this remains ORL1 data. And if something changes, we catch it very quickly so that people using this application can rely on the data, as Tom said, is being updated, and that the data is going to be available consistently to support their decision making.
All right, Chris. Hey, thanks so much. Greg, I'm curious from a federal level, obviously.
Oh, and real quick, I saw Mary laugh when
stand behind this tool. You know that the data has to be reliable. What were some of the conversations you were having among your team at CISA?
Well, it was more the collection of the data, and to do that in a efficient and effective manner. The way we were previously doing it, was just kind of clunky, and it was a heavy lift. So those were some of the data, call it, it's shifting into a different gears. And once we had that data, from that authoritative data source, it was definitely a comfort level, knowing and understanding of where it came from, how often it was updated. Those were the things that kind of make this tool hum. and work effectively. And that gave us a comfort level in moving forward. It took about less than a week to build the tool out, and another 2 weeks to get it through a leadership approval, which was really a challenge from our perspective, because it was something new and different, and understanding that public-private sector partnership, how we developed it, who funded it. We actually had to go through, privacy review, the Paperwork Reduction Act review anytime you start initiating the collection of data. So we had to scale it back to some of the initial design capabilities we had, where we were collecting emails. We actually had a survey form, feedback form that we initially requested, but we scaled it back just to kind of make sure we could get it through those approvals before we released it. Again, those are additional capabilities we want to include down the road, because the tool is really, it's open up to anybody. Anybody can use it. So you hope the intent of the use is good, but again, there are other folks that may be using it for not so much that. So there's, like I said, there's additional capability we want to build into this and go through those appropriate approvals and then roll it out appropriately.
Yeah. Laura, let me also make a comment. Greg touched on something I think is really important. There are many routing app tools out there. We know this, right? And ever since this has come out, Greg and I have been laughing because we've been invited on a number of webinars from DOT folks, health folks, saying, hey, we're working something similar. Can we work together? It really has been an interesting opportunity for the whole ESF 14 concept. Greg and I were talking about this, is bringing the federal agencies together maybe on one thing that can really make a difference. Transportation is that, outside of power and energy and fuel, transportation is kind of important. And it really has struck a chord across a number of groups that have been developing technology for this. That's a big thing, and it's yet to be coming out. The other thing I was making a note here was COVID opened up a number of technology challenges. Early on, I see Ira Tenenbaum's on the phone from New York City. Ira's on our board, and we were trying to address issues like, okay, people are delivering food from the Midwest and they're afraid to go into the city, because at that time it was just a lot of fear, right, about getting infected or whatever. And it opened up the door for staging. Right? Staging is another tremendous possibility for this tool. But you have to have the data. You have to know the data. You have to get the trucking data. You got to get the local data. Who's going to do that, right? This is where I think the SICE community of trusted, vetted people become really important, and having the partnership in place is so valuable. So I think going forward, you're going to see this technology expand, new data sets, new use cases. But I know, Greg, I can't speak for DHS, but I know part of ESF 14 is to merge these efforts, coordinate these efforts, so we don't have 15 things doing the same thing, right? Now, you're never going to have one tool. Don't get me wrong. This is not advocating that this replaces and becomes the Death Star for all of that. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, for specific use cases, if we can all use the same information, right? That's the trick, is the creation of a place that information can be pulled from. That, to me, is the value of that. So I talk about operationalizing ESF 14. I was telling Greg, I don't see a better opportunity than what we have right now.
All right, Tom, thanks a lot. And Mary, just wanted to see if you had anything to add in developing the technology for this tool. What other considerations did you have to think about?
Well, I do want to just kind of highlight, and it kind of builds on what Tom just said, is that if you don't have the data, the technology is really kind of useless. And so I think that is kind of nice that this does highlight to a lot of people, you always hear it's so important that we have this data, please share this data, but how can it actually be used? And so really it's just, if you don't have the data behind things, sometimes it's just a good idea and doesn't get to go much further than that.
All right, thanks so much, Mary. All right, so, and Tom just touched upon this, but our next question deals with future uses. So what needs to be done technically to assist in the growth of the CRA tool? Tim, if I can start with you on this one.
Sure. Yeah. So we wanted to get something out, obviously, as quick as we could, and this is this particular use case for the CRA tool is focused on the COVID-19 pandemic and response to that. But there are several other use cases that this type of application will apply to, not only at the national level, but more specifically at the state and local level. So Tom had mentioned earlier, hurricane response or other types of incidents where you're moving things between counties that may have different restrictions, whether they be mandates or waivers or physical impediments with the bridge being out. And so, what we really need to do is build things down to the local level, right? From an architecture standpoint, right now we're just, point to point, state to state. I'd like to see us get to county, city to city, so we can get down to that micro level as well and really set the stage for this capability to help down at those lower levels as well.
Yeah, good point. Hey, Greg, what about from your perspective? Where do you see this going?
Wow, the sky's the limit on this. Again, we have a capability we built out, and we just definitely need to build on it. When you start talking ESF 14, it touches all different sectors, and it's very much matrixed within the public and private sector. We don't own critical infrastructure, at least not a lot of it. From the physical and the cyber side. So, we just need to build off of that. What other data sets are available? What can we feed into, the tool, and what problems is it solving? Mary made a great point. I mean, we have a lot of our own situation awareness tools that we built out at feed a lot of our dashboards, but if the data is not there feeding into the dashboard, there's nothing to display. And I'll give you an example. We have a hurricane dashboard. If there's no hurricane data feeding into the dashboard, there's nothing there. So again, we need to identify what those data sets are. How can we build them into the tool? And then again, identify what's the problem and issue we're trying to solve, not only during steady state, but during a response and recovery.
Greg, thanks. And Chris, what are you thinking about it for the future of the CRE tool?
Yeah, the use cases are going to be critical, as the other panelists mentioned. What other things do people need to know at a more granular level? And then that leads us to, is the data available and can the analysis be done, and all of those things that go from there. I think pressingly, hurricane season is upon us. Thanks to Mr. Arthur last weekend, we're officially in it. And so there are a whole lot of other use cases just around the hurricane scenario that's going to be fairly active, it looks like, in the east and the southeast, and also the wildfire scenario in the west. So identifying those use cases and then going on the data hunt to find authoritative sources to power the tool doing the analysis that's needed for those. I'm thinking things like reentry orders, evacuation orders, contraflows, all these other kinds of things that are out there is going to be a big part of the path forward.
Thanks, Chris. And Tim, how are you accepting suggestions for your end users if they want to see things in the tool that they currently don't see? How's that getting to you as the builder?
Right now, we've been kind of coordinating with both Tom and Greg on that. We don't have, as one of the challenges with getting this out through the DHS wickets was, making sure that we're not collecting any information from the Privacy Information Act perspective. So, sending emails out to any of the folks here on the panel would be a really good mechanism to make sure that we're getting that feedback and incorporate those into future requirements.
All right, thanks so much. All right, we're gonna, those are all the questions I had. So I want to say thank you so much to today's panelists, not just for your time today, but all the thought, work, and time that you put into this tool. So thanks to Greg, Mary, Tim, and Chris. I appreciate you being on today. And now we just have a few minutes for any questions. So if any of our listeners have questions, feel free to just type them into the Q&A or chat feature of Zoom, and we can get to those to you at the end of the call today. And then Tom, but I'd like to pass the mic to you too, so you can help us wrap it up today. Tom, you there?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Sorry about that. I've unmuted everybody, so if you'd like to unmute your phones and provide, do that hopefully through your phone. Yeah, if you would like to follow the development of this and other initiatives within the SICE, you can register at siceusa.org. There's no cost for that. That begins allows you to come into this trusted, vetted community at kind of a primary level. And we're going to use that group and its working groups and committees to further drive new use cases and develop data for that. I want to thank Mary and Tim and Greg and all the INL team and DHS, a lot of people involved in this, as people may or may not know. But I also want to thank all of the data organizations that actually did the aggregation, right? This is a big lift. I know many of them. I'm afraid to start naming them because I'll forget them, but there was at least 20 different organizations that were out there gathering pieces of this. But if we didn't have the sites, we wouldn't know them, right? And we didn't have the frameworks from the partnerships that have developed through FEMA and DHS, we wouldn't know each other, as well as the big city managers group and our, you know, it's been a trusted crowdsourcing effort. So I want to thank all of them. And this is, again, part 3 of a 3-part series. We're going to make use of this going forward as an education training, but this was our attempt to kind of capture everybody's thoughts while it's still hot in their head, and then we'll have more coming out later. So, Laura, I'll turn it back to you, and I've unmuted everybody. So if your phone or computer's muted, you'll have to unmute that if you want to make comments.
Yeah, and feel free to just make a comment to say hi, introduce yourself. But I wanted to show this slide to give my email address. So if anyone wants to get in touch with the All Hazards Consortium, feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure your message gets to the right person. We didn't have any typed in questions, Tom, so
Okay.
I'm good on my end, and just wanted to thank you again. And thanks to everyone who was listening. And if we can ask the panelists just to hang out for 2 or 3 more minutes to see if there's any last minute questions. Otherwise, thanks to everyone for dialing in.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. I'll hang on.
And I'm going to stop the cloud recording. And Tom, I think we're good. People are pretty quiet today.
Yep. I think COVID's webinaring out, you know, everybody just fine. What we wanted to do was to capture this for future use, right? I made a list of questions, about a dozen of them, for Tim and Mary that I didn't want to get into on this call. One is a very deeper dive in, I'd like Mary, you and Tim to tell the story, day 1, hour 1, how it hit your desk. What was the first sign you were, you know, this kind of like a, I don't know, kind of a play-by-play right now. ESPN has this big thing now called Last Bingo. And the cameras followed MJ around. And I thought that would be great with Tim and Mary to see, okay, hey, Tim, hey, Mary, did you see this? How did we get, what is this, right? I'd like to kind of see how you developed it, right? What were some of the roadblocks? What did you, you know, to me, that's an hour-long discussion there. But I made a note here. I would love to hear that story.
Well, so Mary was the Dennis Rodman. I had to go to Vegas. Right? She was late for like 2 days.
Supposed to share that story.
We've been working with Greg, right? So Michael has been working with both you and Greg. And early on, you know, Ali Gagnon, our chief strategist, was sort of intertwined with a lot of the messaging that was coming out of the SF-14 calls.
Yeah.
And Rick reached out to Ali and said, hey, you know, we need all hands on deck. What can you guys do to help? Right. And so initially we were focused on, I was up until 1 in the morning looking at data sets, right? Like, oh, I found the NGA. This is great.
Right.
And then I think the next day we had a use case call with you guys, and you're like, hey, look what I found. And you had like everything I found times 10.
So,
and I'm like, okay, this is good.
So Tim, you're just confirming we need to do that webinar, right? Because I'd like the same with Chris, right? Because all of us came at this canvas from a different perspective, and
Right.
those stories don't get told very often, right? And I just think that would be really good. I made a note here. I'm going to set that up because I think, Laura, that would be a great, compelling story that just showcases the whole point about a trusted community. Trusting one another. Not that you don't have to validate that. So I got another webinar I've got to jump to at 11. So I made a note. Mary, Tim, I'll circle back with you. Chris, Greg. Well, Greg, you've been such a great supporter. I don't want to bother you too much.
Yeah, it takes a village, Tom. You know what do they say?
Thank you all. Thank you all. Stay tuned.
Thanks,
All
everybody.
right, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.